Contagious!
Hello and welcome to This is Contagious, a show where we look at how contagious ideas are shaping brands and culture. I'm Alex Jenkins. Today I'm joined by James Kirkham, founder of Iconic, to talk about why the most valuable part of any cultural moment might not be the event itself, but everything that happens afterwards. With the World Cup firmly in our sights, we're going to explore why group chats have become the new stadiums, how cultural power is shifting from athletes on the pitch to creators in the feed, and we'll be conducting a pre-mortem on all the ways brands will fail to make the most of this year's biggest sporting event. But before we get into all that, let's have a quick word from our sponsor.
This is the sponsor! This episode is brought to you by Contagious IQ. Yes, we sponsor our own show. Contagious IQ is an intelligence platform that helps brands and agencies supercharge their marketing by learning from the world's most creative brands and campaigns, as well as the most influential trends. If you want to craft better strategies, come up with more creative ideas, and generally create work that's going to put a dent in culture, just search Contagious IQ to find out more. Okay, that's the hard sell over. Let's get back to the show.
Hi James, welcome to the Contagious podcast. Let's start by finding out what is contagious for you right now.
Gosh, there's so much of contagious for me, I guess, on any given day. I mean, listen, look, we're on the eve of a World Cup, aren't we? So I guess I'm being sort of that wide-eyed, younger version of me again, poring over the ads, I guess. I mean, as we're recording this literally yesterday, I saw the Nike spot. I thought it was full of little flourishes. Quietly, I thought it was too long. I don't know if that's a problem for me, though. But I thought, are we going into another chapter and another scene and another Easter egg? I think what's interesting is I think it's stuff like that doesn't touch me like perhaps it used to. I think I'm maybe finding more contagious the stuff around the edges, the lower end, lower fi, maybe even the way people are advertising and promoting their parties or raves, I'm finding interesting. Lo-fi cultural infrastructure, if there's a word there, QR codes taped to lampposts, people gathering together in spaces without their phones for the love of it. But there's a whole bunch of stuff going on out there. It's a bit quieter than it ever was. It's not about the vanity metric. So I guess, is that contagious? It definitely is, but it's in different ways, in different spaces, and I find that quite exciting.
Yeah, definitely. Do you think that's a little bit of you've moved on from the traditional industry stuff, or maybe the industry hasn't moved on with where culture's got to?
I think a bit of both. Certainly some of the industry are leaning right into it. Some work we were doing with the guys at Chelsea Football Club, the entire thing is more of a leak than a launch. This was about a kit launch. I think it's very pertinent that a client is looking to do things differently, leaning into leak culture, leaning into stuff that is far more about perhaps street fly postering, projections, quite guerrilla, leaking kits to celebs in a way that you wouldn't have expected, clandestine kind of paparazzi style shots rather than a more traditional launch in the way that I've just described the Nike spot. I think both exist right now. And I think that's a good thing.
Right, so you're the founder of Iconic, a cultural consultancy. Can you give us the quick kind of elevator pitch of what that is, who it's for, what you do for them?
Yeah, I guess it draws unashamedly and unapologetically on my past. I've spent time running record labels, running football media businesses. I worked myself an awful lot at my first agency, Holler, in music, in entertainment, in broadcast, in film. So it pulls on all of those threads very obviously. The tagline is your cue jump to the front of popular culture. So I spent a lot of time ultimately writing a lot of strategy for a lot of big brands, how to play in this space, how to sort of find their cultural permission, not be interruptive, but, become what people are interested in. I guess that's us at our core.
And it feels like that's become more of an imperative. I think the sense I get is that a lot of what's driving that is, this need for brands to kind of be more in culture and, sort of be part of that, is you just can't buy your way in anymore in the same way that you could, because no one's really got the media budgets. The media is just too fragmented to actually have that impact. Is that fair?
My gosh, yeah, you're virtually right in the deck. So it couldn't be more fair. I think Again, I give a lot of credit to clients these days. I think we're a long way from the absolute hand-holding era and introducing it for the first time. And hey, guys, maybe you should consider music. Like, we're not there. We are dealing and speaking with brilliantly sophisticated brands with fantastic in-house teams, and often client side have come anyway from places like Ents or broadcast or music or sports, and so they absolutely understand it inside out. And therefore, there is a general increased understanding that you need to be a part of the conversations already going on inside communities. And unless you do it like that, you will be ruthlessly filtered out. You are gone in 60 seconds and budgets are wasted, or worse, you might be burnt or hauled over the coals or cancelled, or whatever version of that exists in this slightly odd kind of era post social feed. Not sure where we are, but you absolutely need to adhere and understand to the culture around you because it's everywhere. And I guess the final bit on that, it wasn't long ago that I would be James in my 40s from Richmond. That's the targeting. But now everyone understands we're multifaceted, multidimensional, rich individuals who cross boundaries and cultures and passions and interests. And you need to address people on those terms. And I think that's a great thing. But so brands understand that increasingly and are playing with a far more sophisticated kind of lens in the way they approach it.
Yeah, it's a great thing. It's a much harder thing, I guess.
Absolutely.
So the reason we've hauled you on to the podcast today is you have this amazing idea of this notion of the aftermath economy. Right, let's start with the basics. What do you mean by that, and what does it look like?
I think the aftermath economy, well, it's a nice wording of something I'm sure everyone recognises. So certainly in worlds of sports and music, I guarantee you did it. You might have done it last summer. Look at people coming back from the Oasis shows that sort of swept, well, the world, let alone this country, coming out of Heaton Park or Wembley or wherever it might have been, with that kind of wide-eyed feeling of awe and wonder. I used to see it a lot when I worked at Defected, where when you'd finish Glitterbox, there was literally confetti and glitter on the floor, and brilliant young fans were still walking around with that sense of feeling of wonder of what had just gone before. The aftermath economy is that bit after the event where memories are made. When I go to football matches with my son, it's one of my favourite times of my life. The match is only a small part. The long journeys coming back from, I don't know, Villa Park or Old Trafford or wherever it might be, 4-hour rides in the car. He might be uploading images to a carousel. We might be making a playlist together. He might be inside a group chat on Snap. I might be sort of unraveling memories on the train inside my WhatsApp, certainly inside messaging communities, often inside kind of photo-based Insta-style stuff, maybe making playlists from that night before, from the music on your Spotify or whatever your platform is. That's where the memories are made. That's the stuff that's shared. It's quite indelible and it stays with you and sticks with you. And I guess the interesting part of the aftermath economy is, bizarrely, I think it's quite open. I think it's the white space. So I've spent an awful lot of my career working with sports businesses, working within football companies, brands activating against games, working within music. But everyone's always obsessed about the opening, the TX, the first whistle, the lights out and away we go, that build up to that moment. And it's almost forgotten the bit afterwards. But two parts of that are both kind of true. Like, one, that build up, and we're seeing it right now in the lead up to a World Cup as we are sat here kind of a week or two before. It's a very expensive, very noisy place. It's very cluttered. There's an awful lot going on. There's probably a big ad dropping every single day with some of the giants, and there's a whole bunch of stuff that's going on sort of on the lower tier that's fighting and competing for that attention. But afterwards, there isn't the clamour to be a part of it, and it's surprisingly open, therefore cheaper, therefore a purer space that I think brands can play in. And it's not just about trying to, encourage brands to spend more there, but it feels like it's open, because if that's the place where our memories really get made and cemented and shared, and we look back and enjoy and talk about what just happened and leave our voice notes for our friends and share the photos of the night before and how beautiful it was, that's the stuff I think we're seeking more than ever right now, outside of algorithms or outside of the ceaseless scroll. We want to feel something. And I think most Goosebumps are made there. So I think this aftermath economy is this brilliantly kind of rich opportunity for people to play amongst, just like most of us know and have felt anyway when we've come out of a gig from our favorite band or an event from our favorite artist.
So obviously a lot of it seems to be, it's the kind of like the digital blast radius of all that sort of digital activity that happens after an event, right? There's nothing specifically new on the platforms. Like messaging's existed for a while, social's been around for, donkey's years. Like, do you think something's changed to make this more important now? Because obviously we're seeing things like, there's a lot of data around people are feeling less connected. There's a greater kind of sense of isolation, loneliness, that kind of stuff. And so when they're having these in-person experiences, these huge kind of emotional moments, like seeing like their favorite band, like seeing a huge, sporting event, do you think they're having a greater emotional hit as a result of it? And that's why the aftermath economy is suddenly become much more important? Or is it just kind of always there and we've just ignored it for a long time?
Gosh, well, first of all, I love your digital blast radius point. It's so true about the echoes and the ripples and the residue that stays with you. But I do believe this, it's almost a paradox, isn't it? As we've got more, we're wanting less. So on one hand, if you want to talk cold brand marketing terms, everyone understands vanity metrics are less important right now. No one cares as much. And certainly if you're a younger kind of Gen Z, cooler crowd in, let's say, music, you actively turn out. Like the smarter ones are almost going quiet. It's more legit to be coming to the thing where there's no phones, there's not much of an Instagram kind of following around it, but you know about it anyway. So those micro communities are prevalent. But I really love the point that you're making is that it's the yearning for something more emotionally that's driving this. Because yes, messaging groups have been around for ages. Like the notion of putting up images to a photo dump or a carousel is not brand new. Making a playlist is not new technology. You're absolutely right. We're using stuff that's already been around, perhaps only used in its most personal sense, though, about us. We're using it more for feeling. We are clamoring and more desperate for feeling than we've ever been. We're feeling discombobulated and completely sort of caught between two stools, not quite sure. We're deliberately turning down and tuning out certain apps, for example, and choosing only one or two that's left. So it's not the absolute quest for Luddite kind of analog that I think is right, but it's this yearning for a feeling. Now, if that feeling comes from these events, these moments, I think we're in a period of time that is very reminiscent of post-COVID, only greater. That moment of we're back, we're out again, we can be connected. It feels like that on steroids. And I think it comes from that notion of disconnection that you're describing. And it's definitely to do with this post-social, completely atomized era, toxicity and rage bait and clickbait. But the result is a yearning for feeling. I talk a lot about the best metric right now is Goosebumps. And I know no CMO particularly loves that. They love it if it's the result of their ad, shall we say, but it's not an easy one to measure. But that's the reality.
But that's a super interesting point, though, isn't it? Because it seems like so much of this stuff is happening in what, I don't know if it still is, but it used to be called dark social, messaging apps, private group chats. If you are a more traditional kind of brand marketer and you've been quite keen on the vanity metrics, it's an easy thing to report. When all this activity is happening behind closed doors and the output is Goosebumps, like how are you judging the impact of this stuff?
Yeah, it's incredibly hard for them. Some of the ones
I sympathise. Good luck.
I kind of do though, because I think they get it, but also realise that they're probably slavishly devoted to their own set of dashboards that are born from a C-suite situation anyway. And frankly, some of their entire marketing budgets or their own salary are dependent on those results. So they are caught between those two stools, but at exactly the same time, they're probably sat there showing that various platforms are in an ever decreasing kind of spiral where share of reach is declining, organic growth is declining, and all of those stuff that, again, would probably fit very well on another pod. So most people understand, exactly as you've just better articulated than myself, that the likes of a WhatsApp, and there are other messaging platforms, might be Signal, Telegram, whatever it is, they are like a lifeblood, a circulation stream. They are the entire connective tissue and conduit for every conversation, full stop. Now, you start playing that out a little bit further. Look at the World Cup this summer. Look at half the people aren't even going because of ticket prices. There's a furore about this particular tournament. group chats really are the new stadiums anyway, and they have been for a while. Half the time you can't even get reception when I go to a stadium. So it's the group chat afterwards where most of the stuff gets unpacked. You still want to say you've been there, talk about the game, talk about moments, take a photo with your son or your daughter, have that cross-generational piece. That's something that's forgotten too. The spirit of a group chat is I think one of the best pieces or byproducts of social media. So my 75-year-old mum and my 17-year-old son clearly have a better relationship as a consequence that we are in a group chat together on WhatsApp. I think that's quite unsaid. It's a surprisingly lovely, and it happens all the way through life. Grandparents and kids just sharing stuff. It might be about a picture of a dog on a daily basis, or something anecdotal about something that's going on at college or school, or it creates a connection that simply wasn't there before. And if you then play that up, well, that connection is absolutely there all the time, and it comes out of the biggest physical moments. So to answer your question, I think it's why there's this return to physical in real life, this absolute need to create experiences. You can't just stop and start on social. You can't just only have an end point and a beginning in a social media context and a piece of content if you're a marketeer now, because you're ruthlessly filtered out. You're gone in a second or a moment. You've scrolled past it in an instance. You need something else, and it's generally born from experience. So it's again why the aftermath economy, I think, is so rich, because that bit afterwards where the memories are made, that bit afterwards, which is an outpouring of emotion or feeling or anger or that missed penalty or that incredible euphoria of that win, that is a white hot space. The WhatsApp community is a difficult one to manage in terms of measurement. Although I think we're going to increasingly see more, and I know Meta are playing with it, for example, when you talk about WhatsApp, and I think we're going to see more from other communities too. But I think brands are realizing it's an essential piece of their puzzle. When they talk about communities, well, where's it going to live then? Unless they've got WhatsApp, or unless they're playing within Discord or something that has some level of community element, they know that ultimately it still reaches a dead end, and it still might reek of marketing.
So, like, we've mentioned it already a couple of times. Like, one of the biggest events of the year for the aftermath economy is clearly going to be the World Cup. How do you think this is going to be different from previous tournaments? I think, like, you've already touched on a few of these. Like, there is like the political context, but there's also going to be the audience behaviour. Talk us through a little bit about what makes this one different to previous ones we've lived through.
I've been worried about this World Cup. I bloody love a World Cup. I measure my life in World Cups. I'm rewatching the 1990 World Cup documentary with my son, and I was 13 then, and I'm trying to show him what it's like, and it was about politics and football and the horrific thing that happened when a penalty missed in the former Yugoslavia, and the guy feels like he carries it with the weight of his shoulders because then the war broke out sort of 6 months later. It's an unbelievable time. It was the sort of... It was born in an era of hooliganism, and it shifted almost overnight to joy. So World Cups are big, important, sort of geopolitical, social sort of barometers. So they're more than football. This one is more than football in ways that I've never quite seen, because we have a tournament in a country where the president of that country dominates a news cycle in a way that none has ever done before. Whether it be ICE raids, whether it be banning certain sections of fans from certain countries, whether it be a war in Iran, meaning that it's an Iranian team coming out who might have to play in Mexico, there's a whole load of news that people don't want, and that's sounds frivolous, but I know it's not for us to get on to unpack the news in this pod. But what that is, that's a competing agenda into every single social stream and piece of content that we ever look at. It's very hard to cut through. We want to. I think everyone wants to. Everyone's seeking joy. Everyone wants to gravitate towards something that is positive again. I was out in Russia, and this even now sounds odd, bearing in mind where we are geopolitically, but the Russia World Cup was this incredibly joyful experience. Now, there's under sort of lying reasons and rationale for it, is because there was a Russian government who wanted that image of the world, of course, to many nations. But you saw Russians partying in the street, and it was very poignant, and they were saying things to us like, we don't want it to end because we know it's going to go back to how it was. And Colombian fans dancing with Japanese fans and the English, and my gosh, that was an enjoyable coming together. But wherever it is, it's always about this unity. So I worry it's not going to be quite like that. I hope it is.
Do you think it's possible that it might be a little bit too much of a sort of a hot potato for some brands? Like, do you know what? It's in theory, major sporting events just run towards it. This is great, but there's too many considerations. Or do you think people are like, no, actually, it's still big enough. It's fine. Ignore the political stuff.
Definitely think a few would have turned their backs on it. Listen, a lot of people are locked, as we know, into, decades long commercial deals. So the tier one partners of FIFA are putting out their huge spots, and they have to. I think there's a lot of lower tier brands who think, this is a tricky one. I think a lot still will get involved, but maybe they'll do it quite last minute. It was always quite last minute anyway. People don't realise, unless you've worked in football, for example, it would be 2 weeks before the phone would ring, go, we want to activate, want to do something. You're like, it's in 14 days. There will be brands right now thinking about it. However, I think there's weirdly opportunity. I've kind of joked for a while that the plan B, the plan C, the contingency plan has never been more important. People will need contingencies, and it might be one or two of those contingency plans from brands that win, if you like, the World Cup when it comes to marketing. And to your point, it's not just the geopolitical and the kind of the dominating news agenda that's different. There's also been the sort of the fear factor of the ticket prices. There've been absurd ticket prices. But what it means is a lot of people have been watching at home. Now, if you're in sort of the part of the world where we're recording this today, sat here in London town. The matches aren't the easiest to watch, all of them, in the ways that a lot of people like to. You've got more teams in the group stages than there's ever been in a World Cup before, more matches than ever. But it's going to be quite hard to be getting up at 2, 3 in the morning to really, it's a lot of commitment during a working sort of week. So that means this aftermath economy is going to, I think, come to even more prevalence. It's not just about the emotional outpouring, but it means you're going to wake up to your WhatsApp groups. You're going to wake up to your Telegrams, your Signals, kids on their Snap groups to what's been going on. Assets that get moved around are going to have a greater velocity. You're sort of the blurb on the back of the book mentality of what's just happened in the 90 minutes that you've not seen whilst you've been asleep at 3 a.m. You're suddenly going to see your digest, your little shot of content in the morning that's going to give you a bit of a heads up. My God, that thing happened. Gosh, did you see those Haiti fans? I can't believe that moment that occurred. They're going to be bite-sized, tiny, brief. We're going to consume them in the moments when we're opening our eyes in a bleary state before we've even drunk a coffee, and it will give us an impression, if not the entire version, but it will give us an impression of what went on before. I think there's going to be a lot of kind of early morning sleuthing, very quickly piecing together the story of the night before, and then you'll have your version of it that you will be talking about with friends. But that's a different kind of aftermath. Half those people weren't there, but they're experiencing it through a screen first, probably through second, third, or fourth kind of arm's length versions of it. And this is again where other things take over, like even things like meme culture, which can be sort of sneered at, but meme culture is pretty big right now. And it's amazing how, traveling around the world at the speed of a meme, stories being compressed and distilled into a single moment as a graphic or a piece of animation or a filmed response. So we're going to live a World Cup in those ways. Many people will be staying up and they'll be unpacking it too, and we'll be seeing incredible accounts of people pouring out of pubs at 5 a.m. when Scotland have just gone to penalties. All of this is different from what we're used to. And I'm quite excited by it. And I don't quite know how that's going to play out and unravel, but I'm looking forward to seeing how.
Yeah, it's a really interesting point, this notion of you wake up and the first thing you do is you look at your phone to find out about the football. It hadn't really occurred to me how much of this is going to be, how do I avoid the spoilers? Because so many people are going to want to I don't want to know this stuff. It reminds me of I think it was back in 2012, Heineken did a lovely little branded utility thing. I think it was called the Heineken Fever Keeper, which was like a little, I think it was a Chrome kind of browser extension, and it blocked all the news about the football. I think it was great. The UEFA Championship. It was so, if you were watching in a different time zone, you didn't have all the matches ruined for you.
You see, that's great. I think it's brilliant, but I wonder if that's now impossible. The myriad of streams and the myriad of means with which we consume is just so absolute. And whether it be turning off every notification on every browser, whether it be not going into a browser at all, whether it be not opening your email because the brands have talked about what happened in the night before and they're trying to connect to, every brand's trying to connect to a moment. Every person wants to retell it. I suspect most people, certainly under the age of 35, will lean into it. and just have to digest it in their own way. But that in itself is going to inform and influence this kind of new era of aftermath consumption. What creative brilliance comes out of the morning after that ends up being the thing that you tune into the most, that almost articulates better than the match even did itself? Like, I feel that reflective glow is exciting. You asked this earlier, actually, and I think this is another point of aftermath, is residue, the thing that stays with you. So again, if a brand is leaning in, I think we're a long way away from Oreo dunk in the dark, right? I'm not saying that. You'll get a bit of that. But again, that's gone in 60 seconds. But brands that can really understand residue, how do we make something that properly stays with you, that comes back to you not just hours later, but days later? That, I mean, you've just referenced something from 2012, which is great, but, you know, that comes back to you weeks later, that makes you feel something weeks later. That's impressive. It's very hard to do. We've got 4 or 5 weeks here. That's almost a whole summer of feeling, of memories and emotion. And wouldn't it be great if people can do things at the start that stay with you at the end, that you look back on? Things that are just made in that morning after sort of moment. I'd love to think that stays with us, so that they create a new set of memories for a new generation in the way that I think about 1990.
Yeah, and I guess it's, you know, because of the length of it, it's planning for a marathon, not a sprint in some ways. Should we do a little, have a little, in inverted commas, fun here? Let's do a pre-mortem, right? Let's fast forward. It's the end of the World Cup. I'm a brand. I tried to get involved in the World Cup, but I failed. What was it that I probably did wrong?
I really, and this doesn't necessarily help people because it needs to heighten their creativity times 10, but I think the usual stuff won't cut it. The old formats, I'm not sure, will cut it, for the reasons we described about the intensity of this news cycle. You can guarantee Trump will have a moment in this World Cup. Look at the Ryder Cup, which is incomparable. It's a fabulous little tournament in golf, but it's incomparable. But that was dominated by a sort of a back and forth between Rory McIlroy and Donald Trump when Donald Trump arrived at the course. Look at the Club World Cup, which is the sort of, it's meant to have been the tester, the precursor, the pilot. That was dominated by Cole Palmer rolling his eyes because Infantino and Trump were on a stage together, whereas they were being presented with a trophy. And he's like, what are they doing here? There will be moments like that dominate a news stream that you can't compete with. So assuming you can do the cliche football advertising thing, you're going to be ruthlessly filtered out, in my opinion. It has to be new.
In a noisy environment, it's even noisier. Like the noises are
100%.
Literal fever pitch.
100%. You can't just, hey, we're going to tap into football. And what's football say? Well, it's red versus blue. And it's everyone arm in arm, chinking glasses in a pub. That is not how you do it.
There is a predictable unpredictability about it because, you know, the Donald Trump factor, you can guarantee something unpredictable will happen in ways that maybe was less likely in previous years.
Brilliantly put.
Is all of, yeah, thank you very much, I'll take it. Is the whole thing about reacting in the moment, or how, like, can you do planning for this?
People have done planning. People have planned this for 2 years out. I slightly worry about their campaigns. Well, you know, we've got the Adidas campaign. It's like a brilliant cultural mini movie with Timothée Chalamet, beautifully acted. That was planned. There was a cleverness, I guess, to it, and that could have landed almost at any point. So I think stuff like that has been planned to the nth degree, and it was kind of beautiful in its formation and existed. So I think those brands who are trying to land, hey, when England score a goal, we'll do this. That could be worrying. And I would love to think we're on the eve of some of the most inventive stuff we've ever seen. I think a lot of people have turned up late, and I'm talking about brands. And I think these contingency budgets, these plan Bs and plan Cs, and the feeling of sod it. You know, the World Cup draw was dominated by the village people, for God's sake, let alone the Peace Prize. So I think that was the warning. If people hadn't already realised that this will be predictably unpredictable, as you've so eloquently put it. So my hope is that there will be a bunch of brands at the end going, wasn't it great how inventive we became, how outside the box we thought, how we completely ripped up all the usual football cliches. If it's anything close to a cliche football piece, I'm not sure it's going to survive.
I just love the idea that the village people were the canary in the coal mine on this one. That was the moment we knew. Well, look, traditionally, I guess, being an official partner of the World Cup was always a bit of an expensive game. Now it seems like it's a bit easier for smaller brands to be an unofficial part of the conversation. Like, is that true? Do you think, like, are there brands who are doing that well?
I really do believe it's true in the spirit of what we've just discussed in terms of there need to be inventive. I mean, you guys write beautifully for so many years on this, but some of the best creativity, let's be honest, comes from constraint, certainly comes from adversity. Some of the best awards you'll ever see are the, shoestring budget awards where people have done it against the odds and they haven't got the giant talent. But there's more than that, right? Like, I was doing some work with the guys at Football Co. and they researched, I think it was 13,000 proprietary research they did around Christmas time on this, their Gen Z audience. And you saw, for example, Gen Z follow at least 4 teams. So in the old days, it would be England or nothing, and a brand might panic. Oh, God, what if England go out in the group stages and we don't really have much then to go on? There's no worries about that now. Gen Z have an encyclopedic knowledge of the game. They have such a pursuit of players, almost above nations, which means, like my son, he literally last week bought Amad Dallo, Man United player, Ivory Coast player shirt, and Amad scored in a friendly just this week against France. And in other words, following players you adore at club level brings allegiance and interest to probably the more obscure, if you like, the less expected. It's not your Spains and Frances, but the less expected nations. There's an awful lot of that. Likewise, the stats and the data now actually show that, again, brands who worry, we didn't sign Jordan Pickford for our deal. We don't have an England player, so that means we probably don't have credibility. Unbelievably, amongst Gen Z, it is greater credibility and legitimacy in their eyes to have a creator than an athlete. The budgets for each are vastly different, so they could lean in right now and go and get a really legit, super authentic, creator who's been playing in the space and talking for years, doing brilliant YouTube or Snap, whatever their kind of format is. And chances are they'll carry greater authenticity than the player would anyway. The reason I'm giving data examples like this is it's not just an assumption of, hey guys, be really creative and inventive and you can cut through. Data says it's often outside of the big buys, the big talent buys, the big kind of national team affiliations. It's outside of that where legitimacy is born, certainly in the younger generation anyway. So I think there's sort of no excuses in that respect.
That feels exactly the point you were saying earlier. Like, if you're going in doing the traditional stuff, you're going to get filtered out. And the traditional thing is, well, we sponsored the biggest athlete we could get. And again, to our earlier chat about what's different from this World Cup to previous ones, the thing about creators you just said, that feels like a real sea change.
I think it's huge. I'd never heard that before.
And it'll be really interesting to see if people get that in time.
And I think, I definitely know the guys at JD Sports, now known as JD. They're a client of mine, and they're putting a lot of time and effort working with the likes of Angry Ginger. I mean, he's almost a popular celebrity himself. But, he started with a channel my son was watching years ago, just basically watching Man United games and being a little bit sweary on YouTube. And now he's kind of reached popular acclaim via I'm a Celeb. But the point is, whether it be the likes of Angry Ginger and Bov Boys for that kind of audience with JD, the football is a passport to other cultures. Copper 90 taught me that. There's a guy called Ellie Mengum who makes the most beautiful kind of documentaries there. And he always talked about the unity and the football as the ultimate common denominator and the ability to go and experience the sights and sounds and smells. And he was like, frankly, a football young Australian version of Anthony Bourdain, the way he kind of acted. But you'll see some of that. Creators acting. I don't mean acting up. I don't necessarily mean the rage-baity, clickbait lot. I think, funnily enough, they're disappearing. I think we're seeking the slightly more, certainly entertaining, but the bit more intelligence who want to experience it properly, who want to feel a place and convey what it's like back to their audience or the platforms that the audience are spending time on. I think we're going to see an awful lot of that.
I know that the team that made Ted Lasso were being interviewed about Ted Lasso. They said, when we pitched it, the whole point you had to get was it's not actually about football. And if you were someone who wasn't into football, when you started watching it, you go, I am absolutely absorbed and enjoying this. And I wonder if that penny will drop for people. Like, so much of the World Cup isn't actually about football. It is about the joy, the celebration, the being part of something, kind of regardless of what the thing in itself is.
Totally. That's where the good part of the cliches of of society become true, ending up in environments with fans of rival nations and learning and listening and language and accent and crossovers and traits and rituals, and let alone being out there in hopefully parts of the States that are Mexico and Canada that do a brilliant job of showing off all the gorgeous cultural nuances of each of those places and locations and geographies to a wider world. That is what it's meant to be about. And so if you can bring that to life, be it through creators, be it through wonderful kind of content in real life experiences shared afterwards, talked about, poured over in WhatsApp chats, that should be what it's about. That's the lovely, because again, we are desperate as audiences to feel something. We all want those goosebumps. We want the hairs on the back of our neck. We want it more than ever. No one's putting up barriers against that. But you're right, the 90 minutes is only a tiny part of it.
All this thinking applies completely outside of the world of sport, doesn't it? It is
big time.
Any kind of big emotional type experience, any kind of significant, just impactful event that you share with other people, right?
Absolutely. I mean, music's the really obvious one, funnily enough, because you see it actually. You would, if you look up, if you only need to Google kind of the ends of events to remember. I mean, I remember leaving a voice note when I came out of Cardiff for Oasis's first show back, and I left a voice note for my friend Paolo. And I was actually leaving an awful lot of voice notes for an awful lot of people because I was just so high on the experience of seeing my basically favorite band again, and I called it like 30 years of therapy, and it was cathartic, it was escapism. I was watching 17-year-olds sing every single word next to me and 60-year-olds singing every word, and I hadn't felt something like that for so long. And that outpouring of me, of leaving images and photos and sending videos and making a new playlist and sharing a song which was a reminder of my favorite song of the night and leaving voice notes for others, I sort of forgot I'd done it. And about a week later, my friend Paolo sent me a video capture of a scroll of his WhatsApp feed going upwards for like several minutes, where he had forwarded on my voice note of the night to a bunch of mates of his who all liked the band and were all going later in the summer. And the mixture of, my God, I wish I was there, to James is a swear word for being able to have experienced that, to people piling in and talking about what they thought their favourite record was. In other words, it's the ripple, it's the residue, it's the echo, as I think you called it earlier. That can do that. Music can do that. Sport can do that. In nearly all its forms. That's fabulous.
And again, we talked about this earlier, but the multi-generational aspect of it. I mean, I saw an interview recently with Billy Corgan, the singer and guitarist
Awesome.
from the Smashing Pumpkins. Obviously big in the 90s. And he was like, yeah, and we kept touring, and we just watched the audience get older and older and older, like they stay the same age as us. So, and then there was a turning point, and all of a sudden the youngsters came in, and he's like, and now there are more young people in the audience than there are people our age.
That's nice.
And but they're all blended in a way that they never were before. Like, you didn't get 40 and 50-year-old people at Smashing Pumpkins concerts quite so much back in the 90s. But now it has become a lot more multi-generational, I think.
I absolutely love that. I also like Smashing Pumpkins. 1979 is almost a perfect record for soundtracking a conversation like this about emotion and feeling. And I think that was written about either the time, it can't have been when he was born, it must have been a time in his childhood he was reminiscing and writing about, but it reeks of sunshine and nostalgia and feeling and a different era, and it's a beautiful record, so I love that example.
I would play it, but we clearly can't afford the rights. I guess when we zoom out on all this stuff, it feels like what brands are really trying to achieve is just a route to some kind of cultural relevance. Have you got a sense of whether the nature of what catches on in culture has changed? Or is it more that just being culturally relevant is just more important, as we talked about earlier, because you can't buy attention?
I don't think you can dismiss that latter point. It feels like more than ever, where do we anchor then? How do we give people this sense of spirit and feeling that they feel so lost? And I think we are moving out of this sort of decade, or whatever, however many years it precisely is, of this sort of feed-based dominance where everyone had to game for the algorithm and bait for clicks and try and find ways and routes to rise to the top of feeds or get maybe that magic thing of being shared organically. And we're all moving out of that, and there's a myriad of reasons and rationale why, and and we've got social media bans coming in for the under 16s, and we've got brilliantly lucid, articulate people like Jonathan Haidt or Scott Galloway talking about the issues and perils of it. And look, this isn't an anti-social thing. There is a shift happening right now. It is not coincidence that we are flocking to physical, real-life events. I think the experiential agencies at the moment are maybe the most biggest important agencies in the world, right? Like, you can't make a piece of work without creating something to give people a feeling. It might have a house party feel to it. It might be some beautiful street activation, but for it to have legitimacy, it probably needs to be born from culture, a close-up culture, something born from place or geography or near history or recent nostalgia. It needs to give people those goosebumps and those feelings all over again. It used to be the preserve of your Adidas originals, and they are lucky because they've got one hell of an archive to tap into. But I think other brands are realizing they maybe need to find their place too and find their little foothold. It might only be small, but there might be something in street culture. It might be something in old school telecoms. It might be something in magazine culture. It might be something in a very specific genre of music. Whatever it might be, finding that little position that can resonate and make you feel something, I think, is an essential right now.
So I'm going to wrap this up for us now. So look, we've covered a lot of ground. If there was just one thing you wanted people to remember or keep front of mind, what would that be?
It's going to be hard to say one, but
I'll give you two.
Yeah.
If that helps.
Well, don't interrupt what people are interested in, become what they're interested in. And I think it's easier said than done to genuinely be the thing that is the interest and the focal point that is passed around and loved and shared and given velocity inside a WhatsApp group and talked about afterwards and stays with someone as residue and an emotional resonance that becomes a memory. It's a harder thing to do, but it's a pretty good way to filter your brief. If you have that as your ambition, I think you're certainly going to go in the right direction.
Absolutely perfect. James, thank you so much for your time. As I mentioned earlier, James is the founder of cultural consultancy Iconic, as well as the host of the StoryCode podcast, which is well worth a listen. If you're a Contagious IQ subscriber, you can find a full interview with James about the aftermath economy there. IQ is also where you find a brand new interview with the creators of the recent Adidas Backyard Legends World Cup campaign and the case study about the now 14-year-old Heineken Fever Keeper campaign. If you're a brand getting involved in the World Cup, well, good luck with that. Otherwise, thank you for listening. We'll see you on the next show.